Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po, a few lines into that paragraph, says that these Tibetans from other schools were boastingly proclaiming their systems as their, he says boastingly, and it's a precursor to his criticisms, along with his criticisms of fellow Gerupas. And, you know, boastingly, so he's complaining, criticizing. So great completeness, great seal, boastingly proclaiming these as their own systems. So there's some, I read the next line, this quote, it's very good if they're right and unerring. It's all well and good. This is how I read the line. This is how he leads into it. About the mode of disposition of, no, I mean, there's nothing wrong about the term, the mode of disposition of reality. Because this, I mean, there's, Tibetan is so rich. Shiluk. Shiluk is like the person's character or disposition, but the term is also used for like the mode of abiding, the mode of subsistence, the shiluk. But shiluk is also used for a person's disposition. So it's a great term. So if one's translating in public, interpreting, all these words can be translated the same way. Tenzin Gyatso made fun of me. Here's the person of the words. As if this is terrible that I have a word for every little change of the Tibetan. Because, of course, if you're translating for His Holiness, you can just say reality or for every one of these. You know, translating in an audience or translating in public or, you know, on the cuff. The final mode of abiding. How would, now the next one, you know, I had a hard time figuring out what this means, but in this context, how would your own nose be the place to point a finger? Don't point at somebody else's nose, point at your own nose. This is how I take this line. So then, point a finger means if you're pointing, if he wants you to point at your own nose, then it's self-criticism. If you're pointing at somebody else's nose, it's other criticism. If you're going to say you've got the best description, then, you know, and you're saying you don't got it, then it's other criticism. So, and then Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po adds, in case you didn't get the point, Jang-kya Röl-pay-dor-je is showing his discomfort with all of you. Marangba in Tibetan, Marangba. The short version is this poetry here. where he calls to task all of these people within the Buddhist schools. For all of these Buddhists, he's saying, "Rejoice, rejoice! You didn't have to get all excited. you didn't have to go through all this worry." Now, my feeling when I was working on this previously was if you accepted the absence of inherent existence, you wouldn't have all these problems. And I'm not, when I was looking at it today, since Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po says that the problem, he openly makes this the problem for the first three of these, but not for the others, as I remember. So, in any case, on my first, shall I say, at least several, if not 10 readings, I felt the problem that all of these were facing was that they really couldn't accept the absence of inherent existence. So we'll test that out. And what I decided to do this morning was to repeat all of these down with Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po's explanations. Repeat all of these short versions down with the longer versions at the end of the short versions. So I want to skip down and use my cheat sheet, which only my version has. I was going to send these to you, but I thought I've sent you so many things, I wouldn't send you one more version of this book. And when I got down to the second of these, since it talked about it's concerned with self-cognition, I thought, oh, this is what I finished this weekend, and I didn't want to send you one more book today. And I thought, well, I've got to send that to you today, because that's got a really neat introduction to self-cognition. And so I'll send you that. So you may have to jump around and remember what the first two short versions are. And I can pretend I've memorized the short versions, because I've got the short versions right in front of me in print, which I've embedded just before the long versions. But I'll pretend that I haven't told you that. So, Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po says, after the meaning, since it's not necessary to agitate your mind thinking, he says, you don't need to get all worked up. You proponents of the Great Exposition and the proponents of Sutra, the first two so-called Hinayana schools. His Holiness doesn't like to use the term Hinayana. He came back from meeting with Theravadins, and I'm reporting this, when he was teaching me privately in 1972. We didn't think of it, I didn't think of it, he didn't think of it as, well, we're having private teachings. He was teaching me privately. And he came back from meeting with Theravadins, and he explained they're really upset. They're being called Hinayanas, low vehicle. And from then on, he just didn't use the term Hinayana. That's when he began using, Theravadins or various terms. So, Kembola, what is he using in your books?
Fundamental vehicle.
Fundamental vehicles? Oh. Did that come from you or did it come from him in English?
It came from him. I heard him use that in teachings. And I think it's a good term.
Yeah, it's a good term. So that's when he started. And started, giving up using that term. Of course, when it was subsequent to that he gave commentary on Tsongkhapa's Great Exposition of the Stages of the Great Exposition of Mantra, and Tsongkhapa's using those terms, Hinayana, and he wasn't reforming Tsongkhapa, so that's how that book was done. And when the first book came out, Geshe Wangyal said to me, "Oh, this is terrible. This is wrong. This can't be done this way. This is, But, if you're going to explain Tsongkhapa, you use those terms." But he had already. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. A little bit of history.
Actually, my Theravada friends are very offended by that term. And they like to go to His Holiness's teachings, but whenever they hear, Hinayana or low vehicle or something like that, they think, oh, His Holiness is biased.
Yeah. Yeah.
It creates an unnecessary bad feeling.
Yeah. And of course, when in my books I'm explaining at length using Giant Sheba and, the great scholars who explain the many different points of view from which they are low. But, preserving history. So, agitate your mind, getting your mind all worked up, thinking, now, okay, so let's take a look at it. It's not reasonable, this is good, to assert. Now, how could you assert external objects? You've searched for them, you've not found them, so how are you going to assert them? Right? How are you going to have external objects? Haven't you thought that? You're going to rescue external objects, having not found them? And doesn't your mind get all agitated, worked up, thinking, what the hell are you doing? Positing objects out there. So, Jang-kya is raising his finger, pointing at us. You don't need to get worked up if you really understood anything about the absence of inherent existence. Not making needless qualms. Oh, really? So then what does it mean in the consequence school that there are external objects? What is their status? The external depends upon the internal. So this interdependence of the external on the internal on the external. What the hell does that mean? As His Holiness said, dependent arising isn't just, in my own words, wishy-washy. I don't know what he said in Tibetan, something vague, yeah. That would be the translation of whatever he said, something vague. Like you just haul out dependent arising. And that's your answer out of everything. Sort of like hauling out karma. You don't believe in God, the maker, so you haul out karma. That's your karma. You know, you haul ass out of Vietnam. Vietnam, or what's the name of that country? What? Afghanistan. And somebody says, oh, those poor women. And he said, well, that's their karma. Frankly, I'm so troubled by, so many, like we take one example, girls being introduced to school and, world opening up. I think it's because, I lived with my mother. And I was educating her into giving up this thing where she, even though she turned into a battle axe and beat us all up, she looked on herself, no matter how strong she was, as inferior. And I looked on her, she put me in her room and she's putting on her clothes, and these stockings and her fastening them into her girdle, and putting on her girdle, and these ugly things that she forced herself to. I looked on them as ugly, blah blah blah, and convincing her that she's a person, and even making up this false argument that men, that's only one syllable, imputed by words. Man is only one syllable, woman is two syllables. So women should be worth more than men. I knew that was a fake argument. Here, this tiny, tiny little person using fake arguments. Because the other arguments, I did it as person. You're both equally persons. That didn't convince. So then I used this fake argument. I think part of why I'm so concerned about, being led, brought into having education, because I consider education so important, even though so much of the education, like my own education in first grade of Dick and Jane and Spot, is such crap. Dick and Jane went up the hill. I mean, give me a break. Give me something else to read, to think about. My mind was going. Anyway. But also, a little bit like a fault that I attribute to His Holiness, where he's thinking on things from everybody's side, thinking out things from the Chinese side, and I'm thinking about things from the side of, Biden and 20 years of doing this, and there are other ways you can do it, and you can, we've got to get out of this spending so much money this way, and you've got to get out at some point, and when I get tired, I'll turn on the TV, and there are these guys, I don't know if you see it, but they're arguing You know, not arguing. These guys who from the army, and they're so skilled in it. It's not like Donald Rumsfeld saying, "Oh, things happen." You know, these guys are answering. So it looks like endless questions. You know, you would think they get pissed off at some point, and they're you know, I'd get pissed off at some point. And anyway, look at I'm becoming weak-kneed about the girls, just from looking at it from too many sides. Sort of like becoming like how I criticize His Holiness, looking at it from too many sides. And then I want to say to His Holiness, but look what the Chinese government is getting into. Identifying, you know, through their IA, right? Isn't it called IA? Identifying everybody by face and knowing whatever, you know. And what a society they're developing by giving into them. You know, by having too much sympathy for what they're doing. Anyway, here I am carrying on. I'll add one more thing. If somebody came from the outside, they'd think, look what the Americans have done. What they've done for China. They've borrowed money from them because they don't want to tax their own people. And they've just shoveled foreign aid through this technique into China to build them up into this monster. Anyway, okay. Okay, so somehow the absence of inherent existence allows external objects. So, when you have absence of inherent existence, it's wonderful. Rejoice, rejoice. Be happy, be happy. Okay. Then the next one. Since although self-cognizing consciousness, now look how, is this a sneaky definition of self-cognizing consciousness? Self-cognition? I don't know, self-cognition. It's enough to say self-cognition. But what does self-cognition mean? It's a consciousness that knows itself. It's a consciousness. I'm all for self-cognition. I have to admit my bias. That there's a feeling tone to a lot of our consciousnesses. You know, sometimes at Shravasti, when you go outside and see the forest, there's some, right with your eye consciousness, there's some feeling, you know, nicey feeling, comfy feeling, okay? Mm-hmm. With the eye consciousness, not all the time. You know, maybe bad, maybe neutral, right? You wouldn't notice there's any feeling. Maybe like, oh, that's where the fire's going to come. You know, right with the eye consciousness, there's some, or, you know, if it's around the house, that's where we're going to have to pick up all those needles. Do you rake them up? If you were in Switzerland, you'd have to go out and rake up the needles. I thought that was pathetic. You go out in the forest and it's all raked up. In Virginia, I've got forest. I'm the father of the forest. I don't do a frickin' thing. When I go out in Switzerland, my God, they must have little elves or whatever. They rake the frickin' forest. But I suppose, if you had lightning, it wouldn't all burn up like they do in America. America.
Rake them, where do you put them?
Don't ask. Oh, do ask. What has only the aspect of the apprehender, right? The apprehender is the consciousness. So there's some consciousness, self-cognition is a consciousness. It's sort of like when you think about it too much, self-cognition is a consciousness that is aware of the consciousness, of the I consciousness. Okay, that's not bad. Has only the aspect, okay, that part of it. Not of the trees that you're looking at. Viewing only inwardly. Okay, that's kind of repeating it, right? And alone. That alone. Okay, these three things. It has the aspect. And you sort of get used to aspect. And a lot of people want to replace it with representation. Well, I don't know about representation there. Makes it worse. As if you've got something and then you have a representation. But what, I don't know, aspect, I don't know, aspect's so vague. Viewing only inwardly, okay. Viewing only, viewing? It just is it. But it knows itself by itself. You see, that's going to come up. It knows itself by itself. As if since it's a consciousness, it's a knower that knows itself, it's subject and object at the same time. Well, come on, it just knows itself. You don't have to make it. It knows itself. That's where it gets... it just knows itself without having to say it's the subject and object at the same time. Keizun Sambo said, the Nyingma Lama, Keizun Sambo, said about Shantideva, who doesn't accept self-cognition, well, that's kind of sad, not to accept it. It's great, because of course it knows itself. But it knows itself by itself. Once you tack all that onto it, you see that's what gets tacked onto it. It knows itself by itself. Knowing itself by itself. Knowing itself. When you get the it in, it's a bit too much. Knowing itself by itself. Then you get agent, object. Then I feel a little bit uncomfortable when you put agent, object there. But just knows itself. That's how I'd like to leave it. And then Shantideva says, he has as an example some kind of bear that goes to sleep in the winter, and some mouse, right? Chomps away at its hair, and I don't know where the hair is, but wherever it is, and the bear wakes up and looks at its, it's like I've got a hole here, and then I think, oh, a moth must have eaten away at it, or it got chopped up actually, I think a moth wouldn't eat this. It got chopped up in the washing machine, got caught in the washing machine. So you think about it later. You didn't experience it. I didn't experience it myself. Well, now that's freaking pathetic. To put this up to, put it up to that. Because at the time I'm looking at the trees, I have that feeling. And when you experience the deep mind that is experiencing emptiness or reality or the fundamental mind knows itself, you see. It doesn't just know emptiness, it knows itself. When you experience that, now you may want to say, well, that's beyond language. But as a good Gelugpa, you ought to admit, because language is used for everything in Gelug, you ought to admit this thrilling self-knowledge. And not leave it to metaphor. Anyway, see, I'm giving my prejudice. Bhava Viveka is ruthless. Ruthless, as we shall see. Anyway, but viewing only inwardly, does not exist alone. This word for alone in Tibetan, Yengawa, it's sort of like standing off alone. What comes to my mind is locked in jail. I've been locked in jail a couple times. And I'm claustrophobic, which is kind of weird, since I like being in these cubby holes that my mother had cleverly built into the house, and I like them. Doing the dark retreat in them, and having some success, I must say. So, comprehension of objects by valid cognition is feasible or logically feasible. I add in the word logically because this kind of teba is often used in logical contexts, but one could disregard it and just say it's feasible. Wow. Proponents of cognition. So this is in the mind-only context, but Bhavaviveka is putting down, mercilessly putting down mind-only. So, have we used up the hour? Oh, we have 10 minutes. So let's get out Bhavaviveka.
Could you explain that analogy with the bear and the mouse? I've never understood that.
Well, the bear's been asleep.
Yeah.
And the bear looks at his hair, got a lot of hair, and the bear puts it together. Oh, that frickin' mouse has been eating my hair. And so you see, he puts it together, he or she, the bear puts it together, sort of in an inference that what happened. So Shantideva is saying this is not a self-cognition. It's something put together. Does that explain it? Put together by your smarts.
In the very next moment, and then we feel like we're experiencing it.
Yeah. And I think that's too crude, myself. You know, no matter how fast you put it together, the sort of flip-flop between moments is too crude.
Is that exactly used to explain how Shantideva explains memory?
Yeah, not memory. Well, he explains it as memory.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, as Kizumbo said, it seems pathetic. But Ngawang Belden has an explanation of Chandrakirti also doesn't accept self-cognition. But Ngawang Belden has a way of explaining Chandrakirti's point of view that is so much like self-cognition, which we ought to haul out for another year's work after our 2 years of reading Bhavaveka. No, it's just so cute that by the time you finish reading it, which only takes, 10 minutes, that you say, oh, well, if that's the meaning, if that's what it means not to accept cognition, then they're accepting self-cognition. So I will hold it out. I've translated it. So all that. So we'll just dip in for a moment. If you go to page 146. Tsongkhapa in The Essence of Eloquence says in the middle of the page, 146, says very little. And one of Jigme Tamsha Gyatso's functions that he assigns to himself is to tell us to lay out in more detail what Tsongkhapa's sources are. Tsongkhapa gives one source, Bhavaveka's Heart of the Middle. Bhavaveka's very short. How could the mind itself, which is other than the appearances as objects, be... Now the word is, you could, instead of be perceived, appear, instead of be perceived. It's quite cryptic. And the word nang in Tibetan can mean perceive, it can mean appear. And it's really difficult to figure out which it is. I take it here as, well, anyway, there's a lot to be said. Engal Belden, in commenting on Giant Shiva's great exposition of tenets, has a beautiful, concise, easily understandable presentation which I've brought over to here. Consciousness has two natures or entities, either way, called appearing as itself and appearing as an object. This is the mind-only point of view. So in eye consciousness, for instance, going out and looking at the trees, it has one part which is appearing as itself, the consciousness, in appearing as an object. The trees is appearing as the trees. Because there's one part abiding as a conscious, as the knower. And because of abiding, or because of generated as like another, like the trees, appearing as like trees. So there's the knower and the known, appearing as like the known, like trees. Like a crystal. The crystal, when there's something blue underneath it, there's the crystal, which is crystal, and there's the blue image in it. The crystal's nature is pellucid and clear. So I think somebody who was clever in teaching would ask you, first of all, is a crystal's nature pellucid? This is another word, tangwa. Tangwa. Is it, one word would be in Tibetan sawa. There's another word, tangwa. But in English, is a crystal's nature clear? And of course you would say yes. So then when there's something blue underneath it, then the clever teacher would ask you, when the blue is appearing there, is the crystal's nature still clear? And get you to think about this. And, Tarba, who is our willing, interlocutor, nodded her head, and she said, yes, it's clear. And she's no dummy, so of course she said it's still clear, and it's also appearing as blue, right? She nodded her head willingly. Everybody else was typing or didn't want to be led down the garden path, but she wants, she's no dummy, so of course she said it's still clear. The crystal's a freaking crystal, Jeffrey, so it's gonna still be clear. No, I've got my watch is here. It's 1 minute left. A crystal didn't lose its nature just because blue's appearing in it. What do you want me to say? You may be trying to spring a trap on me, but this is, a good teacher asks a question fairly quickly like that. But what the hell else are you going to say? Right? I mean, that's what I'd say. Otherwise, when you took away the blue, the crystal wouldn't be there. It would have gone away. That's what I'd say. But from the feature of being placed near something, the feature is just that you place something blue there. And so on means red or, whatever you want to put there. It is suitable to display an appearance of blue, right? You're looking in the crystal, right? You're not looking somewhere else. You're not looking down to see, or to the side to see the blue thing. Similarly, consciousness has too a clear nature. This is the self-cognition people. Who are the self-cognition people? In the Sutra school, isn't it just the Sutra school following reasoning? Not the Sutra school following scripture, the followers of Vasubandhu, right?
One following, because it's the Sangha who favors wrong.
Not the Sutra school. There aren't any Sutra school following a Sangha. Sutra school following reasoning.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, but not following a Sangha. Sutra school.
Following scripture.
Sutra school following scripture would be Sutra school following Vasubandhu. Did I say the wrong thing?
No.
Yeah. She doesn't want to admit to her egregious mistake.
Because I think it follows a Sangha.
Yeah, that's what you said. No.
The Sutra school, not the
Sutra school.
Chittamatra school.
Sutra
Not the
school.
Madone.
Yeah, I'm going through the schools.
And the Yogacarya is following scripture.
Yeah. Now you want to switch to Yogacara. Yogacara.
No,
I said the Sutra school
yeah,
following
scripture.
scripture follows Vasubandhu, not a Sangha.
I think so. Oh, what do I know?
Good. Good.
The great professor.
And the Chittamatra school following. Now, there's one thing about it being, I think we have to look into this. Following Dharmakirti, no question.
Yeah.
And I think somebody says it's a question about following a Sangha. But I'll have to look at that. I'll have to look about it. It's unclear. Huh. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. I think that may be an issue within Gelupa. Whether a Sangha asserts self-cognition or not. And so, it may be that some Gelupa scholars say yes and some no. And one Gelupa scholar named Kimball of Shravasti says yes. And so she's going to be right about some. Yeah, not all. I think it's not all. That it's questionable. Yeah, I think some say that. Some Gelupa scholars. So that's a good question. Similarly, anyway, consciousness has too a clear nature, that is an appearance as itself. So anyway, Ngam Belden, like you, Kimbala, a clear nature that is an appearance as itself, and a nature, or that is an appearance as an object. How's that? Having been generated as the aspect of the object. All right, so clearly Kimbala is going to be right about some Gelugpa scholars anyway, where it's, according to them, it's clear for some Gelugpa scholars. I have a memory where for some Gelugpa scholars it's not clear that a Sangha accepts self-cognition. But that'll be up to me to prove that. Okay, and we'll leave it at that. I'll leave you with the question about whether the crystal remains with a pellucid or clear nature even when it's showing blue. I certainly think it does. And I will please read this and see what you think Baba Vivek is saying. And we'll see you next time. We've gone 7 minutes over. In the midst of great controversy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It'll be fun. I don't know if it's fun. Drive you crazy, maybe. Bye.